Welcome to Moonlit Romance Library. Please follow for more stories. Seraphine Bramblevine had spent 17 years protecting Prince Lucivar Nightcrown's beautiful face, and it took him less than 17 seconds to pretend none of it had mattered. The Hall of 12 Moons was full when he rejected her. Every alpha family in the kingdom stood beneath the silver arches. Noble women wore heavy velvet gowns embroidered with pack crests. Warriors in formal armor lined the walls. At the far end of the hall, the empty black throne of the Alpha King waited beneath a crown carved from moonstone. His younger brother stood on the lower dais in white and gold, handsome enough to make half the court forgive him before he had even committed the offense. Seraphine had always loved that face. When they were children, Lucivar's fine bones and long gold-brown hair had made him look too delicate for the wrestling yard. Other boys had noticed. They had pushed him into mud, taken his boots, and called him a lamb born in a wolf's den. Seraphine, already stronger than boys twice her age, had put all three tormentors into a horse trough and asked Lucivar whether his nose had been damaged. He had stared at her with wet gray eyes and said no. "Good," she had told him. "I like your nose." For years after that, she had stood between him and every fist, insult, and cruel joke. When he grew taller and learned to fight, she trained with him. When his first shift left him feverish, she carried him 3 miles through snow to the healers. When he was afraid to speak before the Southern Pack Council, she sat in the first row and smiled until he remembered every word. She had pursued him openly. She had given him crooked protective charms and praised his hair with an honesty that made him blush. He had accepted her attention, held her hand in private, and once promised that no one would ever make her stand alone in a crowded hall. Now he stood in that very hall and looked through her as if she were an inconvenient pillar. Lady Seraphine. Aveline had discovered years ago that the kitchen staff were the only people in this entire frozen fortress who did not look at her with pity. "My lady." Berta, the head cook, appeared at her elbow, breathless. Berta was 63 years old, built like a wardrobe, and possessed the singular talent of being able to communicate catastrophic news through the angle of her eyebrows alone. Right now, both eyebrows were practically touching her hairline. "He's brought someone. He always brings someone. Last time it was 47 prisoners of war and a stolen catapult." "It's not a catapult." "Is it bigger than a catapult?" Berta's mouth pressed into a line so thin it nearly disappeared. "It's younger than a catapult." Aveline set down the bread dough. She wiped her hands on her apron slowly, methodically, the way she did everything, not because she was calm, but because she had learned that if she moved slowly enough, people assumed she was in control. She walked to the narrow window that overlooked the main courtyard, and she looked down. Garrick Blackmere rode through the gates on his black warhorse, his dark hair wind-tangled, his jaw sharp enough to cut accusations, his silver-gray eyes catching the winter light in that way that had once made her heart stutter. He was, as always, devastatingly handsome. 6 feet and 4 inches of alpha wolf wrapped in black leather and the unshakable conviction that the world owed him something. Beside him, on a white mare with ribbons braided into its mane, rode a girl. She was perhaps 23,